Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining me. Today I'm going to talk about a question I get asked pretty frequently, a question on forgiveness. And often this kind of question comes with an email or a conversation where somebody went through a difficult life experience with another person and they're having trouble forgiving them. And I think along with that, because we probably could all understand this within some relationship in our life currently or in the past, what often comes with that is some guilt, especially if we tend to be, quote unquote, spiritual people or practitioners or meditators. And there can be some guilt when we're not able to forgive someone, or we're having trouble, or we're holding a lot of resentment, grief, or anger towards them. And of course, when we're holding a lot of resentment or anger towards someone, that's very uncomfortable. We ourselves are in pain, whether that person is still in pain or not. We're struggling, we're in pain, we're suffering with that emotion. So that's a side issue, but that obviously is important to look at and work with. But I think with what I'm going to say today, with what thoughts I have to share on this, I think it's also helpful for working with our anger, working with our resentment, even working with our grief, actually. So often, as I said, what comes along with this question is a difficulty forgiving someone. And sometimes people ask me, how do I forgive them, or should I forgive them? If such and such happened, is forgiveness possible? And these are more my personal views here, though they do have a relationship to the wider Buddhist path. And I'll talk about both. But basically, when people ask me this kind of question, I usually recommend working with or focusing on compassion-based practices rather than forgiveness. And of course, forgiveness is really important. I think we could say forgiveness is an element of our human relationships that is necessary. I would just call it softening the heart, opening up to others, letting go of resentments and aggression or anger around a certain person or situation. But as I said, I've found, on a personal level, as well as when I have offered this advice to people when they worked with it, I've found compassion practices and compassionate ways of being and thinking, promoting those in our life to actually be more effective than forgiveness. So what do I mean by compassion? So I'm going to first define it from the Buddhist perspective, and then I'll open that up a little bit. So we generally define compassion as the wish for ourselves and others to be free from pain or suffering at all its levels and intensities, and the causes of that. So the wish or aspiration for ourselves and others to be free from pain and its causes. Now, pain here in English, we usually think of pain as something more strong, like a strong physical pain or emotional pain. But pain here also implies not just something we would normally call painful, but also just stressful situations or difficult situations. Any kind of experience, be it a thought, an emotion, a physical sensation, a memory that puts us into an anxious or stress mode. We could also include that in pain. So that definition coming from Mahayana Buddhism is pretty broad, in that these are just words pointing us to an experience where when we actually talk about compassion, we're talking about a combination of an attitude or intention, certain kinds of pro-social or beneficial emotions that can arise, and then, of course, non-harmful or benevolent thoughts towards ourselves and others. So compassion isn't just a single emotion, it's many different factors that are combined together. Yet, it's one of the most important experiences we can foster as a human being, not only on a secular level, but of course, on a spiritual level. This can grow much broader and encompass a very, very wide compassion when we apply it to what the Buddha taught. So getting back to our topic on forgiveness and compassion, why I think compassion is much more useful and broad is that often with forgiveness, there's still a very heavy subject-object relationship here. This sense of being a separate person, separate from the world, engaging with the world, and of course, engaging with others. And when we're engaging with others, sometimes those relationships are pleasant, right? Sometimes they're more indifferent. Most of our relationships with others in the world are indifferent because we don't know them. We don't interact with them. They're quote unquote strangers. And then, of course, we do have challenging experiences with others, obviously. And often we learn from those, right? But sometimes those become really stuck and stagnant and painful when we're holding memories of what's been done to us or what harm has taken place, and we're not able to let go. So forgiveness for me, as I said, has this subject-object component, that there is this kind of fixed entity of ourself in being harmed in some kind of way, and fixed entity of another in being the harm doer. Where compassion takes a different route, it more looks at pain itself. It more looks at life in that suffering, stress, anxiety, like I said, all these different levels of how we experience pain in our human existence, that this is happening to all of us all the time at different levels and through different experiences. So it kind of equalizes the human experience a little bit. Equalize doesn't mean that some people need more attention and or more assistance or more help in certain areas of their life. It doesn't also mean that we can't, work on systems change and all kinds of good things in the world to help others, to lift them up, right? But compassion isn't pity. So when we're doing this lifting up, it shouldn't really come from a place of thinking we're higher than someone else. So that's what I mean by kind of equalizing, where we recognize that happiness or contentment, it's really an indwelling experience. Of course, the physical world matters. So that does, have a very high impact on our inner well-being, but it's not the only thing that matters, right? We can see many examples of this in the world, meaning usually the more money people gather, a certain level of money does make life easier physically, and therefore we can relax a little bit more emotionally, or certain kinds of anxieties can relax. But after a certain amount of income is being gathered or accumulated, there's a lot of studies that show that happiness doesn't necessarily increase, right? Where we can see, and in my own personal experience, being around individuals or families or communities that live very simple physical existences, there's a certain indwelling contentment in their situation sometimes. I'm not saying that's always the case. I'm not saying that they don't deserve, a more comfortable physical existence. It's just that sometimes, as we're pursuing comfort, as we're pursuing whatever we define as a better physical existence, that actually chips away at our contentment. So compassion here in this equalization I'm talking about, it's the equalization or the view where we're trying to open our eyes to how ourselves and all others around us experience stress, anxiety, pain, and suffering in all kinds of different ways. And we want ourselves and others to be free of that, right? Now, what provides the freedom? That's another topic, because that can vary depending on the issue, obviously, and that becomes much more complex. But the point here is the development of compassion and allowing from that compassionate space a solution to come about, right? And when it comes to forgiveness in relation to compassion, for me personally, when I'm looking at myself or I'm working with another I'm struggling with, having a difficult situation with, if I can see, again, this equal playing field that just like me, they're going through a hard time. They've gone through hard times. People don't often harm others just because they want to be harmful. There's usually some kind of pain suffering, wounding behind that, right? And so without pity, we can start to see, I'm just like this person. This person is just like me, right? And we can start to open up this compassionate heart. That is an experience. And I usually define it as a heart that's breaking open rather than breaking down. And what I mean by that is when we break open, we connect and meet others. When we break open, we can meet ourselves in healthier ways. And what I found over time through practicing that kind of approach rather than forgiveness is that if I'm diligent in that, in a certain challenging situation or challenging relationship, often the person I'm struggling with ceases to be a strong enemy. Of course, this is a process, so it's not like they go from enemy to friend so quickly. But we can start to kind of chip away at the thickness of viewing them as a bad person or a harm doer, etc. And what I find is when we're able to let go of quote unquote enemy in regards to someone else or a dislikable person or someone who's harmful or bad or however we're framing it in our mind, automatically forgiveness comes with that because we recognize a person who's just like us. We recognize a person who's just like the people we like, our family, friends, etc. And we're able to open in a different kind of way. Just a little side note here, because often people ask this when I talk on this subject. They ask, well, what about justice? What about when people do really harmful things? Are you just saying to let them off the hook and let them do whatever they want? Of course not, right? We have laws and systems for a reason because we all get confused sometimes. And we how do you say it? We cling to our own needs and ignore others sometimes. And because of that, harm can come out of that on all different levels, right? And so, of course, there needs to be systems and laws and some kind of communal agreements so that harm is being mitigated, right? So we're not talking about some kind of utopia idealism here. We're just talking on a personal level, working with others we're struggling with, working with situations we can't let go of our aggression or fear, anxiety, or resistance towards someone. So, as I said, give this a shot. A few practical tips here is really try to open up more questions about the person rather than answers. When I'm really frustrated with someone, I notice my mind or my thinking mind basically ruminating on how bad that person is. I find my thinking mind kind of running by itself, repeating a story, repeating what they did, how bad it was or is, reinforcing they're a bad person, they're a horrible person, how could they do this? And then usually what I notice is my stress, anxiety, and anger increase when that's happening. So sometimes we just need to break the ruminating pattern first. And of course, meditation can help with that. We focus on the breath, we focus on the body, we connect with awareness, and we allow the thinking mind to settle a little bit. From that space, we can start to ask more questions, as I said. We can start to look at the person a little bit more objectively. If it's a person we know, that's going to be easier because we can remember times we've been with them or known them, either personally or through people close to them, where they're not a horrible person, where they're a likable person. So what we try to do is we shift our thinking, our thoughts, from focusing on them as solely dislikable and horrible, and start to reflect on them being likable. If it's not by us, at least by others. If we don't know the person, I like to imagine the person in situations with loved ones, with a pet, right? Like how easy is it to imagine like a cute puppy with someone, and that melts all of us. So I know this isn't easy at first, so you have to just try in small bits or small doses, but this does work. And as I said, probably the main practical tip is just allowing ourselves to settle a little bit after we notice, hey, the way I'm working with this situation, the amount of anger and resistance I'm holding towards this person that I can't release or let be, this is harming me, right? And for me, there's an example I always think of, which has definitely happened to me in traffic, and I know it happens to other people I know, where I may sort of yell, if I get frustrated enough at a driver who's cutting me off or driving really wild and putting people in danger, I may sort of yell, a certain word I'm not going to mention here. Whatever he chooses is probably, a handful of them we could choose from. And what I noticed when I reflect on that is like, no one got harmed in that particular situation. If I was alone in the car, no one got harmed except for me. I'm the one who grew my anger through allowing it to build and build and build until it has to come out of my mouth in a negative way, in a harmful way. The person in the car is long gone. They cut me off or did whatever they did and drove off. So I'm the one stewing. I'm the one sitting in my aggression and disease. So I think that's partly we do really need to reflect on that. We do really need to come to a conclusion. I'm ready. Like, this is holding this burden is enough. I'm ready. And then after that, as I said, we can settle the mind through meditative practices, and then we can use inquiry work or open question work of trying to open up a new perspective towards that particular person or set of people. So, as always, I do hope this is helpful. Please let me know in the comments, because it helps me to know kind of what kind of content you all are enjoying and you're getting something out of. And as always, feel free to reach out to me on my website, scotttusa.com. You can always reach me there. And of course, I've got all kinds of courses and things you can check out as well. Thanks so much, and I hope this was helpful. Take care.